My name is Elena, and this is the story of how one text message destroyed everything I thought I knew about family, and how, in the end, it gave me a power I never expected to have. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. For nearly 8 years, I served in the military. I lived through desert heat that could melt the skin off your bones, nights so cold they froze my breath midair, and battles that changed the way I saw the world forever. I missed birthdays, graduations, weddings, and holidays. But through it all, I carried one comforting thought. When my service ended, I would go home. Home, where my family would be waiting, where I would finally belong again. That thought got me through some of the darkest nights of my life. So, when I got the news in early December that I was being released just before Christmas, I was overwhelmed with joy. Finally, after all those years of sacrifice, I was coming back. I imagined my mom's kitchen smelling like cinnamon and pine, my younger brother teasing me, my dad giving me one of his rare, stiff hugs. For the first time in years, I let myself believe in a perfect Christmas. But life doesn't always hand you the happy ending you picture. 5 days before my flight home, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. I opened it expecting maybe a question about my flight or a practical update. Instead, what I read nearly made me drop the phone. "Don't come home, Elena. You're not welcome anymore." At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe his phone auto-corrected something. Maybe he was joking in his dry, borderline cruel way. But as I reread the words over and over, my heart sank. It wasn't a mistake. I tried to call him. Straight to voicemail. I texted my mom. No reply. I reached out to my brother. Silence. It was as if, overnight, my entire family had vanished. As if they had cut me off completely, with no explanation. The hurt was unbearable. Here I was, someone who had given nearly a decade of my life to service, who had risked my own body and soul for something greater than myself, and my own blood was telling me not to come home for Christmas. I could have written a long reply. I could have begged for answers, pleaded to know what I'd done wrong. But something inside me broke that day. Something hardened. So, I just typed one word back.
Fine.
That was it. No questions.
No tears.
No fight. But the silence that followed was louder than any explosion I'd ever heard on the battlefield. 5 days later, I woke up in my small apartment. It was cold, the kind of cold that makes you want to stay under the covers forever. My phone buzzed as I reached for it groggily, and what I saw jolted me fully awake. 10 missed calls. 3 from my mom. 4 from my brother. 2 from my dad. And 1 from an unknown number. I frowned, my pulse quickening. I opened my voicemail, and my breath caught as I listened. "Elena, this is Mr. Sanders, your family's attorney. It's urgent you return my call. There are legal matters that require your immediate attention." A lawyer. Their lawyer. My family had disowned me days earlier, but now they were desperate to reach me, even dragging a lawyer into the picture. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, my heart pounding in my ears. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just about family anymore. Something bigger was at play. And in that moment, I realized something. They might have thought they could cast me aside like I didn't matter, but now they needed me. For the first time in my life, I held the power. And I wasn't about to give it up so easily. Because if there's one thing I learned in the military, it's patience. And another thing? Revenge. This was no longer just about Christmas. This was about showing my family exactly what happens when you turn your back on someone who has already given you everything. And so, the story began. Not of a homecoming, but of a reckoning. I didn't call back right away. Maybe that sounds cold, but I wanted to let the panic settle in on their end. For years, I had been the one waiting by the phone, longing for connection, hoping for a voice from home. Now, for the first time, they were the ones waiting on me. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. What could possibly be so urgent that my father, who told me I wasn't welcome, would suddenly flood my phone with calls? And why would they drag a lawyer into it? I showered, dressed, and made myself a cup of bitter coffee before finally dialing the unfamiliar number. "Mr. Sanders," a deep voice answered. crisp and professional. "This is Elena," I said flatly. "I got your voicemail." There was a pause. "Elena, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. Your father instructed me to inform you that your presence is required regarding the family estate." I nearly laughed. The same father who told me 5 days ago not to come home? That one. Sanders cleared his throat. "I'm aware there's tension, but this is a legal necessity. Certain documents cannot proceed without your acknowledgement. If you don't cooperate, there could be consequences for the entire family." The way he said it, cautious but urgent, made my stomach twist. My dad had always been controlling, secretive, especially with money. He worked for decades at a manufacturing plant, invested quietly, and loved to boast about his legacy, though none of us had ever seen proof of what that meant. "What exactly do you need from me?" I asked, pacing the small kitchen. "I can't discuss details over the phone," he said. "But I strongly advise you to return home as soon as possible. The matter concerns inheritance, wills, and property. Your father may have acted rashly, but he cannot exclude you without your consent. That's why he needs you." Consent. The word hit me like a blade. My father had tried to erase me from the family with a single text, but legally he couldn't. Not without my cooperation. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces began to click. He didn't want me home for Christmas. He didn't want me involved at all. But he needed my signature, my presence, to complete whatever scheme he was orchestrating. I hung up with Mr. Sanders after promising nothing, then sat at my table for a long time, staring at the wood grain, my fists clenched. They didn't want me, but they wanted what I could give them. The betrayal burned deeper the more I thought about it. All those years I had sacrificed for my country, telling myself I was making my family proud, only to come home and find out I was nothing more than a legal obstacle in my father's plans. When my phone buzzed again, it was my mother's name on the screen. For a second, my chest tightened. Maybe she would explain. Maybe she would tell me it was all a mistake. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Elena," she whispered, her voice shaky. Please call the lawyer back. Your father, he didn't mean what he said. It's complicated. We just need you to sign a few papers." I cut her off. "Complicated? Mom, he told me I wasn't welcome. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Do you think a couple of signatures will erase that?" She sobbed softly, and for a moment I almost gave in. But then I remembered all the lonely nights overseas, writing letters that were never answered. Birthdays where no one called. The silence that had been my family's only gift for years. "Mom," I said coldly, "I'll think about it." Then I hung up. That night, lying awake, I realized this wasn't just about money or inheritance. This was about control. My father had always wanted to control everything. The house, the finances, even our emotions. But now, for once, the power wasn't in his hands, it was in mine. And the soldier in me knew exactly what to do. Wait, watch, and strike at the right moment. So, I made a decision. I wouldn't rush back. I wouldn't play the obedient daughter who dropped everything when summoned.
No.
I would make them sweat. I would make them realize exactly what it felt like to be powerless. The next morning, I called Mr. Sanders again, but instead of agreeing, I asked questions. Lots of them. I wanted every detail, every angle. He tried to dodge specifics, but the more I pressed, the clearer it became. My father was trying to push through a transfer of property, land and assets worth far more than I'd ever imagined. But he couldn't finalize anything without me. Without me, the entire plan fell apart. And that was when the anger turned into something sharper, colder, resolve. They had cut me out of Christmas. They had cut me out of their lives. But now, I had the power to cut them off from everything they were so desperate to protect. And I was going to use it. The calls didn't stop. If anything, they grew more frantic. Every morning when I woke up, there were half a dozen missed calls and desperate texts. My brother, who had ignored me for years, suddenly became poetic in his begging. "Please, Elena. You don't understand. We need you." My mother's messages were drenched in guilt and pleading. "Your father didn't mean it. He's just under stress. We can fix this. And my father? Nothing. Not a word. Not a single message. He let everyone else do the dirty work while he hid behind silence, like a general commanding pawns to do the fighting for him.
Typical.
I didn't reply. Not to a single one of them. Instead, I took my time. I went to the gym, read books, even decorated my little apartment for Christmas with a tiny fake tree. Every time I walked past my phone buzzing on the counter, I smiled to myself. Because now I knew, without me, they were stuck. And the more desperate they became, the more control I had. Still, I wanted to know exactly what I was dealing with. So, I reached out to an old friend from my unit, someone who'd gone into private security and investigations after leaving the military. His name was Mason, and if anyone could dig into the family estate, it was him. Can you find out what my father's assets actually look like? I asked him over coffee one afternoon. He's being cagey. I want the truth. Mason grinned. You want me to run a background check on your old man? I smirked. Exactly. A few days later, Mason called me back with the kind of information that changes everything. Elena, he said, your dad isn't just sitting on a retirement fund. He's sitting on a gold mine. Multiple properties, investments, even offshore accounts. We're talking millions. I nearly dropped the phone.
Milio?
My whole life, my father had preached about living modestly, about not wasting money, about hard work being its own reward. And all along, he'd been hiding wealth like a dragon hoarding treasure. And now, the picture became clear. He wanted me cut out not because he hated me, though maybe he did, but because keeping me out of the will meant a bigger share for himself, for my mother, for my brother. He hadn't texted me, "You're not welcome," out of anger. He'd done it out of calculation. He wanted me gone before the paperwork was done, so I couldn't interfere. But he'd miscalculated one thing. I wasn't a scared little girl anymore. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. They had erased me from holidays, from birthdays, from years of family life, and now they wanted me erased from their fortune too. So I started planning. First, I called Mr. Sanders, the lawyer. This time, I put steel in my voice. Mr. Sanders, I'm willing to cooperate. But only on my terms. He hesitated. What terms exactly? I want everything in writing. Every asset, every property, every account. I won't sign a single paper until I know exactly what's at stake. There was a long silence before he answered. That may complicate things. Then it's your problem, I snapped. Not mine. I hung up before he could argue. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my family. The girl who used to beg for scraps of attention was gone. In her place was a soldier, a strategist, someone who had survived far worse than cold shoulders and cruel texts. But power always exposes the truth. 2 nights later, my brother showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find him on my doorstep, red-eyed and desperate. "Elena, please," he said. "Dad's losing it. He's furious. Mom's falling apart. Just sign the papers. End this." I crossed my arms. Why should I? What's in it for me? He looked stunned. What's in it for you?
Your family.
I laughed bitterly. Family? You ignored me for years. None of you answered my letters or my calls. Dad told me I wasn't welcome. Now suddenly I'm family again. His face crumpled. It's not like that. You don't understand. Dad, he broke off, shaking his head. He's not well, Elena. He's been hiding things. If you don't help, we could lose everything. I leaned against the doorframe, staring at him. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not just desperation, fear. Maybe, I said softly. That's exactly what needs to happen. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Then he turned and stormed off into the night. I closed the door and locked it, my heart pounding. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for justice. For years, my father had controlled us all with money, silence, and fear. But now the balance had shifted. And I wasn't going to let him win this time. Christmas Eve arrived, and instead of the warm family gathering I'd once dreamed about, I found myself driving through the icy backroads of my hometown, heading straight toward the lion's den. Mr. Sanders had finally agreed to a face-to-face meeting at my parents' house to settle matters. I hadn't promised to sign anything, but I wanted to look my father in the eyes. After everything, after the silence, the betrayal, and the lies, I needed to hear the truth from him directly. The driveway was just as I remembered it, lined with snow, the house glowing with the same Christmas lights that had made me feel safe as a child. But stepping out of my car, I didn't feel warmth. I felt something colder than the winter air, resentment, anger, and betrayal swirling all around me. I knocked. My mother opened the door, her face pale and drawn. For a moment, her eyes softened, and I almost saw the woman who used to tuck me into bed. But then she stepped aside silently, and I walked past her into the living room. My brother sat hunched on the couch, avoiding my eyes. Mr. Sanders was seated near the fireplace, papers spread neatly on the coffee table. And across from him, in the armchair like a king holding court, sat my father. His presence filled the room. Even after all these years, even after all the damage, he still had that commanding aura, the kind that made you want to shrink back. But I didn't shrink. Not anymore. "Elena," he said, his voice clipped. "Sit down. We don't have much time." I stayed standing. "You made plenty of time when you told me I wasn't welcome. Remember that?" A muscle twitched in his jaw, but he didn't flinch. I was angry. I said things I shouldn't have. Angry, I spat. "You erased me from this family with one text. Don't you dare play it off like nothing." The room went tense. My mother wrung her hands. My brother buried his face in them. Mr. Sanders cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should." "No," I cut in sharply. "I want to hear it from him. Why am I really here? What do you need from me so badly that you're willing to crawl back after cutting me off?" My father's eyes, cold and sharp as steel, finally met mine. "Because I built this family, this home, everything we have. And I'll be damned if the government or some greedy lawyers take it away because my daughter refuses to cooperate." His words were like ice water. "So that's it," I whispered. "Not love. Not reconciliation. Just money. Always money." He leaned forward, his hands gripping the armrests. "You don't understand what's at stake. There are accounts, properties, you have no idea how much I've secured. But the law requires every heir's signature to finalize the trust. Without you, it all falls apart. Do you want to see your mother lose everything? Your brother? Do you want everything I've worked for to vanish into taxes and strangers' hands?" I stared at him, my chest heaving. "You worked for it? You built this family? No, Dad, you controlled it. You hid everything from us. You treated me like I didn't exist. And now you need me? After all these years, after cutting me off like garbage, suddenly I'm useful again." His lips curled into a sneer. "Don't flatter yourself. You're just a signature. Nothing more." Something inside me snapped. All the hurt, the rejection, the nights alone overseas, the endless silence, it boiled over. "Nothing more?" I shouted. "I gave up 8 years of my life serving this country, thinking I was making you proud. I fought, I bled, I suffered, and all the while, you couldn't even answer a single letter. You couldn't give me 1 ounce of respect. And now you want me to save your empire?"
No, Dad.
Not this time. The room was silent except for my ragged breathing. My mother sobbed quietly. My brother whispered, "Elena, please." But I didn't look at them. My eyes were locked on my father's, and for the first time in my life, I saw something I'd never seen there before. Fear. "You're bluffing," he said, though his voice trembled. "You wouldn't let us lose everything. You're not that cruel." I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. "Cruel?
No.
But I am done being your pawn. I don't care about your money. I don't care about your property. I care about justice. And if letting it all burn down is the only way to make you understand what you've done to me, then yes, I'll do it." The silence that followed was deafening. For once, my father had no comeback.
No commands.
No power. Mr. Sanders shifted uncomfortably. "Elena, if I may, legally, you are entitled to a portion regardless." You don't need to sign away anything. If you refuse, your share is secure, and the rest becomes entangled in litigation. It could take years. I smiled coldly. Then maybe years of watching it slip through his fingers is exactly what he deserves. My father's face turned red, his fists clenching on the chair. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was choking on his own fury. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. The room was suffocating with tension. My father's rage was a storm brewing across his face, his jaw clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might break. For my entire life, I had feared that look, the one that silenced me as a child, that kept me small, obedient, desperate to please him. But not anymore. I stood tall, shoulders squared like the soldier I had become. He could glare, he could threaten, he could curse me in his mind 1,000 different ways, but he couldn't control me anymore. That was gone. Finally, he broke the silence. "You'll regret this, Elena," he spat. "You think you're punishing me, but you're only destroying your family." My voice was calm, steady.
No, Dad.
"You destroyed this family a long time ago. I'm just refusing to clean up your mess anymore." My mother sobbed harder. My brother muttered something I couldn't hear. But none of it mattered. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, reclaiming the power I'd let him hold over me for so long. I turned to Mr. Sanders. "You said my share is secure regardless?" He nodded cautiously.
Yes.
"If you refuse to sign, the courts will tie up the rest. But your portion, your legal entitlement, remains yours."
Good, I said.
"Then that's all I need. Let the rest rot in court battles. Let Dad fight for every penny. I'm done." I could feel my father's glare burning into me, but I didn't flinch. I picked up my coat, turned on my heel, and walked toward the door. "Elena," my mother cried out, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. We can fix it. We can be a family again." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. For a moment, my chest tightened. A part of me, the little girl I used to be, wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that after all this pain, there was still something left to salvage. But then I remembered that text message. "Don't come home. You're not welcome anymore." I opened the door without turning back. "A family doesn't throw you away like trash," I said softly. "And it doesn't come crawling back only when it needs something. I don't need a family like that." The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside, and with it came a wave of something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The weeks that followed weren't easy. My phone kept buzzing with calls and messages I refused to answer. The lawyer tried again and again to get me to reconsider. My brother even showed up one last time, banging on my door until I threatened to call the police. But through it all, I stayed firm. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bending, wasn't begging, wasn't trying to earn love that was never freely given. I had drawn a line, and for once, they were the ones on the outside. Word spread quickly in my hometown. People whispered about the falling out, about the lawsuit, about the once proud patriarch who was now fighting tooth and nail just to keep control of his empire. I heard through the grapevine that his health declined under the stress, that his temper drove even my brother and mother into silence. But me? I slept better at night. I decorated my tiny apartment for the rest of the holiday season. I cooked myself a Christmas dinner, nothing fancy, just roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a slice of pie. I sat by my little fake tree, lights twinkling softly, and for the first time, I felt at peace. Because here's the truth, revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, revenge is simply refusing to play by their rules anymore. Sometimes, revenge is reclaiming your power, choosing yourself, and walking away from those who tried to break you. My father thought I was just a signature, a pawn, a problem to be erased. But I showed him I was something far stronger, someone who could no longer be controlled. And as the months passed, the legal battle dragged on without me. My father's empire crumbled under its own weight, drowning in lawyers and paperwork. My brother grew resentful of him. My mother stopped calling entirely. Slowly, The house of cards he had built began to collapse. Meanwhile, I built something new. With my share of the inheritance, I started fresh. I found a small cabin outside of town, surrounded by woods and quiet. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I adopted a dog. I went back to school part-time. For the first time in my adult life, I was living not for anyone else's approval, but for me. Sometimes I still get the urge to check my phone to see if they've tried again. And sometimes they have.
But I don't answer.
Not anymore. Because I finally learned the hardest lesson of all. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, loyalty, and respect. And when those things are absent, all you have left are strangers who happen to share your last name. So, when people ask me about my Christmas homecoming, I smile and say, I didn't get the family reunion I expected. I got something better. I got my freedom. And that, to me, was the sweetest revenge of all. Clapperboard, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Revenge Files, and turn on the bell notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support helps us share more powerful revenge stories every week.